The airboat roared, pushing a wall of humid wind and the sharp smell of swamp water into their faces. For Jake, Maya, and Ben, this spring break trip to the Florida Everglades was supposed to be a wild, unforgettable adventure. Their guide, a grizzled old local named Silas, was a man of few words but countless stories, his face as weathered as the cypress trees that lined the twisting waterways. "Hold on tight, folks," Silas yelled over the engine, expertly navigating the narrow channels. "Everglades ain't no theme park. She got secrets." They laughed, feeling the thrill of the speed, the endless expanse of sawgrass stretching to the horizon. They saw alligators, their eyes glowing red in the setting sun, and exotic birds soaring overhead. It was wild, beautiful, and exactly what they'd hoped for. As dusk began to paint the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Silas steered the boat deeper into a part of the glades Jake didn't recognize on their map. The channels became narrower, the cypress trees denser, their mossy beards hanging low like ancient curtains. The roaring engine suddenly felt very loud in the growing quiet of the swamp. "Just gonna show you a special spot," Silas mumbled, his eyes scanning the water, a strange look on his face. "Real quiet, where the glades truly sleep." The boat slowed, the engine dropping to a low hum, then a stuttering cough. It died completely. The silence that followed was instant and heavy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying, leaves and something else now, a faint, sweet, strangely floral smell, almost like jasmine, but with an underlying hint of something damp and metallic, like stagnant water and rust. "Engine's dead," Silas said, his voice flat. He tried to restart it, but the motor remained stubbornly silent. "No worries. Happens sometimes. I'll take a look." He grabbed a toolbox and disappeared to the back of the boat, muttering to himself. Jake, Maya, and Ben exchanged nervous glances. The swamp, without the airboat's noise, felt suddenly vast and alive around them. The buzzing of insects became louder. The splash of unseen creatures in the water sounded closer. The sky was now a deep, inky black, dotted with the first stars. Fireflies began to blink among the cypress knees, and then, from somewhere out in the dense, dark water, a sound began, a faint, ethereal humming. It wasn't the wind, nor an animal. It was a low, melodic song, impossibly beautiful and chillingly sad. It seemed to float over the water, weaving through the hanging moss, pulling at something deep inside them. "Silas?" Jake called out, a prickle of unease running down his spine. No answer. "Silas?" Maya repeated, her voice thin. They looked towards the back of the boat. The toolbox was open, its contents scattered, but Silas was gone. The water around the boat began to ripple softly, without a breeze. The sweet floral smell intensified, now almost sickly sweet, and beneath it that metallic tang was stronger, sharper. The humming grew louder, clearer, beckoning. Then, from the dark water just beyond the boat, a single pale hand slowly rose, impossibly graceful. It was long, slender, adorned with something dark and shimmering like seaweed, and it beckoned them, slowly, deliberately, into the murky depths. And as it did, a chorus of faint, watery whispers rose from the swamp, echoing the siren's song. Come, rest with us forever. The Everglades, they realized, didn't just have secrets, it had a voice, and it was singing for them. The pale hand rising from the dark water froze them with fear. It stayed there for a moment, slowly waving, then sank back down without a splash. The eerie humming and the watery whispers grew stronger, coming from all around the airboat, like the swamp itself was singing. "We have to go," Maya whispered, her eyes wide. She looked at Jake, then at Ben. "Now." Jake, though terrified, tried to stay calm. He grabbed his phone. "No signal," he muttered, trying to call for help. "Dead end. We're really stuck." Ben, who usually had a plan for everything, was quiet. He kept staring at the spot where Silas had disappeared. "He wouldn't just leave," Ben said slowly, his voice low. "Not Silas. Something took him." The air around them grew heavy, colder. Even though the swamp was normally warm and humid, the sweet, sickly smell was so strong now that it made them feel dizzy. They could hear soft, splashing sounds nearby, like something big moving just under the surface of the water circling the boat. Then, through the thick hanging moss on a nearby cypress tree, they saw it, a faint, glowing red light. It was small at first, then grew, pulsing softly. It looked like a pair of eyes, large and unblinking, watching them from the shadows. The humming intensified, becoming a powerful vibration that shook the airboat. The whispers changed. They were no longer just inviting them to rest. Now they seemed to tell stories, faint, distorted images forming in Jake's mind. Blurry scenes of people falling into dark water, of hands reaching up for help, of strange, beautiful flowers blooming in the depths. Suddenly, the water directly under the airboat began to churn violently. The boat rocked back and forth, throwing them off balance. A thick, dark tentacle, slimy and covered in strange, glowing algae, burst from the water, wrapping itself around the front of the airboat. It was impossibly strong, pulling the boat slowly, steadily, deeper into the dense swamp. "Grab something!" Jake yelled, holding onto a seat. Another tentacle shot out, then another, wrapping around the boat, pulling it faster. The small, glowing red eyes in the moss-covered trees seemed to multiply, appearing all around them, watching their slow, inevitable journey. As the airboat was dragged deeper into the swamp, the sweet, floral scent grew almost unbearable, overpowering. The humming filled their ears, weaving in and out of the watery whispers. Jake looked over the side of the boat into the dark water. The tentacles were thick, ropey, but they weren't just skin and muscle. He could see faint, glowing filaments under their surface, like pulsing veins, radiating that same sickeningly sweet smell. Then, from the depths of the water, a new sound emerged, rising above the hum and whispers. A low, guttural gurgle, deeper and wetter than anything they had heard before. It sounded like something huge, something ancient, was slowly opening its mouth. And as the last piece of light from the setting moon disappeared behind the cypress trees, plunging them into total darkness, a large, dark shape began to rise from the very center of the channels ahead, its surface shimmering with the same glowing algae. It was immense, like a mountain in the water, and from its depths, the beautiful sad song swelled, now full of a terrible hunger. Come to us. The glades embrace forever. They were no longer just lost. They were being welcomed. The colossal shape rising from the depths was beyond anything they had ever imagined. It was not flesh, not rock, but something in between. A massive organic mass that shimmered with sickly green and red light, covered in layers of glowing algae and strange root-like growths. It dwarfed the airboat, its immense form slowly unfurling in the dense darkness, revealing more and more glowing, unblinking red eyes embedded within its surface. From its deepest part, the guttural gurgle reverberated, a sound of immense, ancient hunger. The tentacles already holding the airboat tightened, dragging them relentlessly towards the rising horror. The sweet floral scent was now cloying, suffocating, making their heads spin. The humming and whispers intensified, no longer a song, but a dizzying cacophony of desperate voices, overlaid with the constant splash of unseen currents. "Jump!" Ben screamed, his voice strained with terror. He grabbed Maya, trying to pull her towards the edge of the boat. "Where?" Jake yelled, his eyes darting frantically. The water around them boiled with activity, glowing tentacles and pale waving. Hands rising and sinking, beckoning. Escape seemed impossible. As Ben struggled to pry Maya's fingers from the boat's rail, a thick, slimy tendril burst from the water next to him, wrapping around his leg with impossible speed. It pulled him down, hard. He gasped, choking on the sickly sweet air, his head disappearing beneath the murky surface with a desperate splash. "Ben!" Maya shrieked, reaching for him, but he was gone. Only the churning water and a few rising bubbles remained. The mournful song from the colossal entity swelled in triumph. The remaining tentacles on the boat pulled harder, drawing Jake and Maya closer to the rising mass. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. It wasn't a creature that lived in the Everglades. It was as if the Everglades itself was a living creature, and they were being drawn into its monstrous heart. As their boat scraped against the slimy, undulating surface of the entity, the smell of decaying flowers and metallic blood was so intense it was dizzying. Jake felt a strange, tingling sensation on his arm and looked down. Where the water had splashed onto his skin, a faint, almost invisible reddish filament seemed to be extending from his forearm, seeking connection, pulsing with a dim, internal light, identical to those in the entity's glowing eyes. The whispers changed again. They were no longer mournful, but insidious, comforting, and oddly familiar. They spoke directly to Jake's mind, 1,000 voices blending into one harmonious thought. Do not fear. You are home. We are all here. Rest, finally. Rest. Maya, strangely, seemed to be growing calmer. Her frantic struggles lessened. Her eyes, still wide with fear, began to take on a faraway, dreamlike quality. She turned to Jake, a serene, almost blissful smile spreading across her face. "It's beautiful, Jake," she whispered, her voice soft, devoid of terror. "Don't you hear them? All the stories, all the lives. It's peaceful." She reached out a pale hand, not to grab him, but to touch the shimmering, algae-covered surface of the monstrous entity. As her fingers made contact, her skin seemed to glow faintly with the same green and red light, and a network of tiny, glowing filaments spread rapidly from her fingertips, disappearing into the pulsating mass. Her body went limp, a faint sigh escaping her lips, and she slid silently into the water, dissolving into the glowing depths, becoming part of the vast organic horror. Jake screamed, a raw animal sound of pure despair. He was alone, trapped. The airboat was dissolving around him, slowly being absorbed by the entity's surface. The filaments on his arm twitched, pulling at his skin, and the comforting whispers in his mind grew louder, promising endless rest. He was next. Jake's screams died in his throat as the filaments on his arm pulsed fiercely. The comforting whispers in his mind, now a deafening roar of welcome. The monstrous organic mass of the Everglades entity loomed over him, its glowing eyes fixed on his trembling form. The airboat had almost completely melted into its slimy surface, leaving him clinging to a final dissolving piece of metal. He was losing the fight. His strength, his will drained away, replaced by the same serene calmness that had overtaken Maya. He felt a strange pull, a profound weariness, an undeniable urge to simply let go, to sink into the beautiful, sad song and join the countless others. But then a flicker, a tiny, almost painful flash of defiance. It wasn't his own. It was a faint, fragmented image from the stream of memories flowing into him, a desperate struggle, a final, guttural shout against the current. It was Silas. Silas, the grizzled old guide who had seemed to disappear without a trace. Jake saw him deep within the entity's swirling, luminous depths, not fully absorbed but tethered, his old eyes wide with a desperate warning. He wasn't welcoming them. He was fighting. He was trying to break through. The sweet, floral scent suddenly became a choking stench of rot. The metallic tang intensified to that of fresh, cold blood. The soothing whispers in Jake's mind cracked, revealing raw screams of agony beneath them. The beautiful song was a facade. This was not peace. This was consumption. With a final desperate surge of his own vanishing will, fueled by Silas's silent warning, Jake plunged his hand into the dissolving surface of the entity, not to surrender, but to fight. He grabbed onto one of the glowing tentacles, the one nearest him, pulling with all the strength he had left. It was slimy, surprisingly warm, and felt like dense, living rope. As he pulled, a section of the entity's surface, where his hand was, began to recede, not dissolve, but retract, as if he had hit a pressure point, a nerve. The glowing red eyes on the monstrous mass flickered wildly, and the serene song broke into a cacophony of enraged, guttural gurgles. A sudden, powerful current surged through, the water pulling Jake and the remnants of the dissolving airboat away from the main mass, towards a narrow, dark channel that opened into the dense cypress swamp. The entity thrashed, its vast form creating immense waves that slammed against the trees, but it could not follow. It was too large for the narrow passage. Jake felt himself being carried by the current through the winding, familiar channels. The sweet, cloying smell lessened, replaced by the fresher air of the swamp. The glowing filaments on his arm retreated, shrinking back into his skin, leaving only a faint, pulsing warmth. He was eventually washed ashore, half drowned and barely conscious, near a small abandoned fishing shack miles from where they had started. He was found by a passing hunter the next morning, delirious, muttering about glowing eyes and a singing swamp. Years later, Jake was a different man. He avoided boats, large bodies of water, and especially the Everglades. He never spoke of Ben or Maya, or the horrors he had witnessed. He tried to forget, but sometimes on humid Florida nights, When the air hung heavy and still, he would feel a familiar, subtle, pulsing warmth in his left forearm. He would look down, and though there was no visible mark, he knew it was there. The lingering trace of the filaments that had connected him to the Everglades entity. And as he'd watched the news, see reports of new, sudden disappearances in remote areas of the glades, or strange, unexplainable sightings of shimmering lights in the depths, a chilling realization would dawn on him. Silas hadn't disappeared. He was still in there, a reluctant, trapped guardian trying to warn others through the entity's own insidious network. And Jake, he hadn't truly escaped. The entity hadn't simply let him go. The reddish filaments and the pulsing warmth on his arm weren't just remnants of contact. They were a deeper connection, a part of the Everglades consciousness that had decided not to consume him, but to repurpose him. He was not a victim who got away. He was a conduit, an unwitting seed-bearer. The ancient amphibious entity of the Everglades didn't just lure people into its depths. It also found ways to extend its reach beyond its watery prison. Jake was the new link, carrying a part of its essence, a silent, dormant fragment of its monstrous being, unknowingly spreading its influence, its whispers, its terrible song to new, unsuspecting places, ensuring that the Glades could one day truly embrace the entire world. The siren's song had been a lure, but his survival was the ultimate insidious victory for the ancient swamp.